Welcome to the second part of Chapter 4, Falling for Truth, of which will be 4 parts. The umpire and its 3 pathways. Please don't shoot the umpire. He's doing the best he can. Sign in a Kansas City ballpark, 1880s. Work within the first pyramid can be classified as the areas of modern religion and spirituality. Included as well can be self-help, psychological therapy, alternative healing, breath exercise, connecting with spirit realms, and divination. In short, all things designed to allow me to function more easily within standard reality. These all can serve an important purpose. In the ancient world, such subjects were the fabric of the entire society, encompassing the world of adults and a part of every child's instruction. Our world is missing even the most basic of human instruction in these areas. On one hand, it makes sense that most of the modern spiritual marketplace is all about the first pyramid work, because that is where almost the entire human population resides. The problem is in the formatting. In other words, the way that the set of instructions is presented as if it were the whole package. Someone who manages to reach the umpire will, in comparison to those opening elements, come away with the sense that they have truly taken a step up in their functioning, and rightly so. Rose compared the top of the first pyramid, the umpire, to a computer program. If allowed to run, it will help us, individually and as a species, to be safe, allowing us not to die off before our basic purpose has been fulfilled, to spawn and then raise another group of children. Something in us urges and inhibits. Something within encourages bravery and fear. Something within makes us enter joyously into the game of life, and at times long for death. And yet all of these things seem to form a pattern, which make for some kind of destiny. Something within us, if we allow it, will make decisions for us, take care of our children, and condition one for dying when the time comes. Richard Rose. Rose chose the word umpire because it connotates a deciding mechanism. It is the English name for a referee, a moniker still used in tennis and baseball, whose decisions are generally very cut and dry or black and white. For example, in tennis, in or out. In baseball, ball or strike. Within one word, within our world, Rose's umpire chooses what to eat, what habits to have, as well as nearly the entire spectrum with regards to the use of one's time and energy. For everyone planted in the seats in Plato's cave, this is mostly a lost or unused function. Rose claimed that the problem for most in the physical world was that the obstructions and distortions in our psychological makeup prevented the umpire from functioning properly. People kept eating poorly until they have a heart attack, for example, or keep smoking until they contract cancer. A functioning umpire instinctively knows what is needed, as well as what activities should be moderated. Moral codes were created hundreds of years ago because so many umpires, for some reason, no longer were functioning properly. To discover the umpire and get it working effectively and efficiently may be interpreted by a religious person as salvation. Meanwhile, a New Age person might call this finding their higher self. The conscious is another name for this feature, a voice inside that is trying to steer one away from actions that create harm for the individual. While this utility is not necessarily a spiritual aspect, being simply a programmed robotic function, to have this utility operating properly will by default lead to more vitality and mental clarity. To a prisoner, having spent their whole life to date without such a function, especially considering the depth of mess they create for themselves without it, this would indeed appear akin to a salvation-type realization. That in and of itself showcases another reason why it is hard to get past this level. The fear encountered when pondering whether to lose the umpire would mean returning to the chains of ignorance. We are not trying to become perfect, but see ourselves in clarity. This is not a school. Why would some omnipotent being create a bunch of ignorant people and then torture them to make them better? Richard Rose. There is little need to present the traps and chains of modern religions within the context of the material being presented here. If you are reading a book such as this, you likely turned away from those ideas long ago. For most seekers, the turning away from a Western religion happened when the fairy tale being presented was exposed beyond repair. But that leaves such individuals with a distinct dilemma. What happens when one has seen through a religion, a supernatural explanation for where we are and why we are here, but finds themselves still searching for ultimate answers? If recent history is any indication, one turns toward what has been broadly labeled spirituality. Yet spirituality is much more of a religion than most people tend to think. On one hand, as a system, it is freer than standard Western religion. However, instead of offering a future paradise in exchange for following moral codes, spirituality promises that we can be happy all the time, right now. As soon as a tradition or way becomes for sale, as so often is the case in the spiritual marketplace, it must be made attractive to the buyer. There is nothing wrong with the study of various practices, from psychic connection to alternative healing, to create an organism that is healthier, more intuitive, and more efficient. However, the modern spiritual lifestyle requires money, and is a way to show the masses that they are one step above based on the goodies they showcase. It is difficult to explain in words, but once you look for it with these people, it's easy to spot the dynamic. Rose felt that most people moving towards spirituality did so as an attempt to compensate for unhappiness, suffering, and loneliness, rather than as a means for seeing who was suffering and why. The bulk of the spiritual crowd is searching for a feel-good answer. But to ever have a chance to finally know, we must first understand our own minds intimately. In other words, to see all the psychic pollution that is in there. Even ideas we have of God, spirituality, or society can quite often be little more than pollution. Yes, I am dismissing spiritual aspirations within the sleeping dream state, quality of life issues like happiness, peace, health, prosperity, and so on, and salvation and life everlasting to take it a small step further. Greed, vanity, ego, all arising from fear. Yes, I categorically dismiss all of it. That is the muck and mire in which mankind wallows, and from which sincere aspirants must extricate themselves. Now the valley is the mountaintop, and everyone is enlightened if they go along with the switch. The new goal is right here, right now, and need only be recognized as such. Voila. Total failure is now total success. Jed McKenna. One challenge is how people use words to describe the spiritual. What one means by the word awake may not be what another person using that word means. It gets very confusing if we substitute our meaning of a word with what another means by the same use, especially in this field. Since I am mainly discussing Rose's ladder, I can comfortably keep utilizing his 3 coined words for the 3 pyramid levels. I could have used Egyptian terms, alchemical concepts, or simply made up 3 words. The word itself is not important, just a marker to show what area is being discussed. The first stage, the umpire, can be characterized as an aha moment. A small example of one would be remembering where our lost keys are. A larger one could be encountering a shift in control. Becoming a full functioning adult could be another way of seeing it. The second stage, the observer, would be to no longer believe who and what we thought we were. This, by default, results in a shift of identity. Most of what is classified and labeled in books as enlightenment is really describing this second observer stage. The third stage, or pyramid, is reaching what is. In other words, encountering the absolute as the only reality. Adyashanti wrote of how what he calls awakening, i.e., meaning reaching the process observer in the second stage of the work, in my opinion, is composed of 3 qualities. I feel that this idea of qualities, which he discusses, should exist at the top of all 3 pyramids. This would then actually mirror the Hermetic process as each pyramid would then represent one of the 3 qualities. This also makes the ladder holographic, wherein each part both contains and mirrors the whole. Adyashanti labeled these three qualities as mind, heart, and gut. Here, I have taken the same basic principles, but I have renamed them mental, emotional, and philosophic. This is to give less of an idea that these qualities are tied specifically with any part of the human body. They each, instead, are elements of the universal makeup. In summary, every one of the pyramid tops is made up of a conglomerate of these three qualities or aspects. Given that every pyramid contains the three qualities, it would therefore make sense that one can find three distinct pathways to reach the top, representing each aspect. I have a new diagram that shows a pyramid with the letters MEP, mental, emotional, philosophic. These letters represent the three pathways, which we use distinctly to spiral inward, i.e. walk the ladder. While it is possible that we may touch all three paths along the way, typically we will tend to be the main focus of one in our ultimate direction. As each pathway has a different set of methods, so too does each distinct path look unique within the diagram itself. Interestingly, I believe that each pyramid stage also reflects one main quality. The first pyramid is climbed with an emotional edge. Therefore, for most, as the general mass of population are in the first pyramid, their main goal is to feel better or improve themselves. Emotion is the driving force. Thus, we must use some type of emotional, devotional base to rise. A mental or philosophical approach in the first stage is going to be much more difficult if there's not a matching emotional element to the process. Should someone naturally follow an emotional path, they will be more in tune with the work of the first pyramid. An emotional seeker has the most likely success of reaching the umpire, but on reaching it is most likely to go no further, as their main focus is to feel happy. The second pyramid is mental, as it is topped by the process observer, the greater mind. Hence, all approaches in some way have a mental aspect to them, looking at our mind and thought, even if the pathway used is mainly emotional or philosophical. A mental approach is more likely to reach the process observer, and a mental seeker is more likely to stop there, as they wanted most to know their mind, which is the main gift at the process observer. The third pyramid is the philosophical pyramid, and thus requires a primarily philosophical or existential approach to maximize the work for that stage. Again, one can travel the third pyramid with a mental focus, but without philosophical examination as a main element diving into hopelessness and emptiness, one will stay trapped at the height of the mind and never find the betweenness point to begin rising. Is it clearer to you now why the presentation of love, joy, and being happy is the basis of the spiritual marketplace? Most who have taken a step up have done so in an emotional-based first stage and thus are presenting what they know. Most cannot fathom that there are stages beyond what they reached. To present love as the answer for everything is true from the context of the first pyramid. It also becomes the main stumbling block when trying to communicate with someone in the second pyramid stage who has moved into a more mental examination of self and reality. A mental-focused approach, M in my diagram, will move up the left edge of each pyramid to the summit, thus appearing as a continuous sloped line. That makes the mental path generally the most direct, but it is also the most treacherous, as there are no stopping points. There is also a long slide down if we slip. The emotional direction, for a while, follows either the mental or philosophical side, depending if our deepest draw in our identity is toward pain or pleasure. At a key point, the emotional seeker will plateau, usually from an experience designated as psychic or mystic, toward the center, and then rise straight up, similar to the image of floating. Thus the emotional path does have work involved in the original slope, but it is the most enjoyable path to walk due to the plateau moment of rest and the floating-like aspect of being raised and the shorter drop to the plateau point should one fall. The philosophical path is symbolized on the right slope, indicating a driving force of pain and challenge, and is usually the most difficult of the three on the body-mind. Here there is a slope similar to the mental, but traveling in a zigzag fashion, or a lightning bolt. This path comes less from clear defined practice, and is more of a haphazard life pushing you here and there. Then out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning occurs, and a level jump. The examination of hope and despair is a key aspect of this path, hence the resulting zigzag pattern. This path can raise someone the quickest, but carries the most confusion, for one is not sure what happened, how they got there, or where there is. A long integration period is needed for the philosophical seeker. Each quality is unique, and could be thought of as its own special viewpoint from the umpire. If it came via the mental path, it is the realization that what we think shapes our world. It is often brought about through self-help practices, psychological counseling, or contemplation from various amounts of reading. The person begins to focus on more on changing thoughts, positive affirmations, or ways to limit negative thinking. There is a dropping of fear when we see that we, as well as the world, have an interactive element. We seem co-creative. If the realization came through a devotional path, generally through the giving of oneself to a religion, organization, nature, or even the care of a child, the view causes the wants of the self to become secondary to the perceived wants of something else. Our wants come as a reward for helping this other attain their wants. Thus the focus is no longer completely on ourself. This emotional realization can also occur through a mystical moment, such as a connecting with a dimension beyond this one, or a near-death experience. Generally, where an angel or dead family member comes and tells them they are loved and protected. The result of this emotional rise is to operate in a more selfless way. For those who came existentially by a lightning bolt type of philosophic path, they see the world around them as a type of dream. The need to control will drop when the world is seen as less real and thus not as important. They soon find that the less their egotistical wants get in the way, the easier it is to shift the dream. However, due to seeing the world as a dream, this type of realization can also lead someone to a great deal of paranoia and hopelessness, if it is not tempered with humor and a compassion for the dream itself. Each quality presents to us that life gets easier if we give up some of our personal control. This follows Rose's description of the umpire as a feature that helps us and looks after us if we step out of the way and allow it to function as it was programmed. We rise from the chains in Plato's cave and we explore the cave reality, but generally we only have one flashlight. Given that reaching the top of the first pyramid and having a new mode of operating in reality is such a big thing, why do so few venture beyond that step? A major reason is that this experience is what is presented by many teachers and books as the outcome someone should aspire to. It makes sense that if everything one comes across points to this very thing one has accomplished, then there's little reason to think there might be further steps to take. As such, many umpire-realized people become teachers and authors, prescribing their how-to-feel-better formulas while never thinking that they are bunkering in rather than looking to go beyond. The umpire is all logic. Even someone with an emotional realization, if you look carefully, will just display an emotional logic. If I pray X number of times, give X number of gifts, then the deity will feel so moved and loved by me that it will give me Y. This is a sort of mathematical emotionalism. The umpire is still the ego, or still greatly influenced by the ego, and still in Plato's cave, but with more movement. In no case is there a complete shift in identity, the clarifying factor of the second stage. Here the person who is Jim Smith on planet Earth still thinks they are Jim Smith on the planet Earth, just living more selflessly. A big reason why any umpire realization will not take a person too far into knowing themselves is that the seeker was mainly seeking to escape their problems. If the problems that started them searching come to an end, they stop seeking, and simply live out their lives at this more comfortable level. Secondly, the umpire may be never fully integrated because one generally sticks to that single part of their realization that comes from their specific path, while ignoring the other portions. Each path has its own built-in trap. One with a mental realization will in time see that they cannot force the dream to give them all of their wishes just by thinking about it. Where is their $1,000,000? Why has their wife left them? Or their dog gotten run over in the driveway? They must be inferior because the books say they should be a god. Most will take more courses or read more books with the thought, if I just know more, I will get more. The trap is the idea that wisdom can only be accomplished via mental knowledge. The emotional realized, though, seeing that they are more than a body and are protected, have mostly ignored the philosophic and negative sides of reality. They are not able to handle it when tragedy strikes. They think the helpers are upset with them, so they try to find more rituals and ways to pray and appease the gods. In other words, some attempt to float away from mundane earthly problems. As a result, they lose touch with their own life and everyone else, except to tell them how blissful and happy they think they are. A push up the ladder comes when someone begins to wonder if this help was coming from an outside source, or if it had always come from the inside. Have I only been praying to and getting help from myself? That question, if followed, will produce a radical shift from looking outward to looking inward. The philosophical realized person sees the world as a dream, but they lose the ability to see how they relate as a human being within that dream and can lose empathy. Others, due to the lack of conscious understanding of what has happened, and with no one around to guide them, decide they must be crazy and try to forget the whole thing. To step beyond the umpire requires one to question if the realization, while useful, may not in fact be true or complete. Rose claimed that the umpire is limited, for it only has its built-in programming and only sees things in dual concepts, much like a computer that operates only through ones and zeros. It is very good for choices being made in the mundane world, but without seeing the master plan of the entire universe, it makes choices based upon what it thinks is best for the survival of the person and species without seeing the overall story. It is good in the areas it is programmed for, but does not work well in other areas. What should be surprising is that if there is a computer-like feature built into us to make basic living decisions and for our best interests, then who or what is constantly overriding this inner voice? Thank you for listening to the next section of Jacob's Ladder, Chapter 4. We'll be back soon with the next section, which will be the second pyramid, and discussing the process observer.